Welcome back to the Business Leaders of America podcast, where business leaders come to share their advice and journeys to success with existing and emerging leaders of America. Now, here's your host, Dylan Bloyd.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Business Leaders of America podcast. Today's guest is someone who knows how to command attention, and not just in the boardroom. Jimi Gibson began his career as a professional magician, performing for sold-out crowds before turning his focus to a different kind of magic, messaging that actually works. Now the vice president of brand communication at Thrive Agency, Jimi brings over 25 years of experience in cutting through the noise and helping businesses say the right thing to the right people at the right time. He's also the creator of the Magic Script, a brain-based framework that helps brands speak curiosity, create connection, and drive action without jargon or gimmicks. In this episode, we'll discuss Jimi's approach to marketing and dive into the importance of clarity in messaging, especially in today's crowded digital world. Welcome to the show, Jimi.
Great. Thanks, Dylan. Glad to be here. I'm getting ready for a good conversation. Can't wait.
Yes, absolutely. So I wanted to start, because because you started your career, as I mentioned in the intro, as a professional magician performing for sold out crowds. So what drew you to that world, and when did you realize those skills could translate into the business and marketing space?
Yeah. That's always sort of a head scratcher when people go, "What? You started as a magician? How does that relate?" I
Right.
was looking through some boxes a couple of years ago and I found this little membership card to Merlin's Mail Order Magic Club. And I turned it over and had my little name on there. And the date was kind of shocked. I was 4 years old when I
Wow.
started that little mail order club. I guess my parents signed me up maybe, and you got like a new trick or something every month.
Yeah.
Then I got another magic kit when I was 6 years old. And it was kind of interesting because during middle school, I was doing birthday party shows for my friends, and their parents would pay me to entertain my friends at their birthday. And I thought, wow, there could be something to this.
Yeah.
And there's actually a couple of underground magic organizations pretty well known in the magic community. And I was a member of one. I grew up in Virginia, and there was a guy in there who was an account manager at an ad agency. And he said that they had a major client who wanted somebody to help with promotional shows doing magic. And so I'm connecting all these dots from the birthday party shows and thinking, wow, this is cool. And so I started that in high school. And while everybody else was working retail and fast food, I was doing these shows. And that relationship lasted another 16 years. So
Wow.
fortunate enough to, they always say you got to know somebody who knows somebody. So I think that ended up being how I got introduced. But, and hanging around the ad agency at different points during that relationship, I just thought, wow, this is a really cool thing. It was sort of at the tail end of those Mad Men days.
Yeah.
And, we call them digital agencies now. There are probably a few formal advertising agencies, but as I started to learn more about it, I actually went to college and studied creative advertising,
Wow.
and just always had that filter as I was working on a campaign or doing something related to marketing, that it was kind of just a magic trick. And the communication requires getting somebody's attention,
Mhm.
keeping them curious, and then you've got to have the finale to the trick, right? And that's sort of the conversion aspect of a marketing conversation. So, yeah, it's always been part of the lens that I see marketing through, and
Mhm.
they've sort of fed each other throughout my career.
Wow. No, I love how they fit together, because you're right, because I don't think a lot of people would really put those two together, but it makes absolute sense. I love that you did the birthday parties for your friends. I mean, that's amazing. What would you say your favorite trick was?
Well, I actually had a theme park show that I was hired for, and then I produced two theme park shows. And there's a magician who invented a trick way back in the 1920s where he would float a volunteer, not a volunteer, float his assistant in the air, and it was under a cloth. And when they got to the peak of, you know, above the magician's head, the magician would whip the cloth off, the person would vanish in thin air, and then they would appear in the back of the theater. And so when I was hired to do that theme park show, it was a theme park right outside of Richmond, Virginia.
Hmm.
That was one of the illusions that I was so excited. And to me, that was like the ultimate magic trick that I've read about in this book since I was a kid, and then was able to perform it on stage. And it always got a gasp. I would always wait for that gasp. And like before I pulled the cloth, I would just wait and listen. I'm like, okay, here it comes. And then you pull the cloth off and the assistant vanishes. And then everybody said, what in the world? And then there was a sound effect that happened, and spotlights went to the back of the theater. And yeah, it's one
Oh,
of the good memories of those
yeah.
days.
I love that. Do you perform it at all for Thrive Agency for your team?
Not that one, but I do
Right.
perform magic tricks anytime
Yeah.
I'm going to an executive meeting or getting together as a company. That's the first thing. Show us a trick, show us a
Yeah.
trick. And then I speak a lot on behalf of the agency. And, sales presentations can sometimes be pretty boring, marketing presentations. And so I always like to include some sort of magic trick and keep the audience's interest. And it's a good icebreaker
Yes.
if we have a booth at a conference or a convention. So yeah, I would say it's something I fall back on quite a bit in a
Yeah.
business
Oh, I bet.
conversation.
And I'm
Yeah.
sure it makes it memorable as well. They're always going to remember you after that. So that is great. So speaking of Thrive Agency, you've spent now over 25 years in marketing. How did you end up joining Thrive Agency, and what drew you to their approach and mission?
Yeah. So out of college, and then while I was performing for that um, corporate client, I was working at ad agencies and actually started out as a graphic designer and then worked my way up to creative director, and then ran an agency in Virginia and sort of learned from the bottom to the top
Yeah.
from a creative aspect. What does it take to satisfy a client? And then from a profitability standpoint, what does it take to keep a client? Right.
Right.
And so um, during COVID, I was working at an agency that uh, really served professional speakers and authors
Mm,
and helping them create their marketing plans. But COVID sort of killed that business
right.
because of all the reduction in public events and things like that. And so I was looking for an opportunity. Of course, that business has bounced back significantly, and
Right.
actually, it's more robust than it's ever been at this point. But I had had a lot of experience in different agencies, and I sort of knew what I was looking for. I think folks out there, maybe their first or second job, learn what the business is about. Every business is different. Every culture is different. Every way
Hmm.
in which you provide services to clients is different. And so I had had enough experience to know, here's the non-negotiables, and here are the things that I definitely don't want, and here are the things that I want. And really just applied. And it was a group interview. It was kind of strange. I'd never been on one of those before where other candidates were in the interview with you,
Oh, wow.
but had done some research and knew that Thrive's culture and the way they went about doing work was the way that I believed it should be done. And so ended up not getting hired for the role that I had interviewed for, but started to structure their strategy approach. I'm a firm believer if you don't have a strategy, you're going to end up somewhere you don't want to be, and probably somewhere very expensive. And so,
Hmm.
not that Thrive wasn't doing strategy before, but it wasn't as formalized as it is now.
Right.
And so, was very excited to bring my background from the creative side and from the executive side and all of the things that I'd been through into how we go about creating a plan for a client. And I think there are a number of agencies that just sort of jump in and start doing work. And
Yeah.
I was really a fan of, let's take a break. Let's figure out what the business goals are. Let's make sure we're not approaching it from a cookie cutter perspective, but we
Right.
are intentional about what the business owner needs. How are we being more consultative than prescribing something that they may not need? And yeah, so I've been here 5 years, and I think I've had five different titles in that time,
Mm.
and it's been an awesome experience. So
Yeah. No, I mean, you're right. It has a tremendous growth because when I was doing my research, I think they've even made the Inc. 5000 list over 7 years straight. Is that correct?
that's right. Yeah,
Yeah.
there was. So the business was actually started 20 years ago by Matt Bowman. We're celebrating our 20th anniversary in October, which is kind of a unicorn in
Yeah.
the digital marketing space.
Right.
And he had a business partner that came on and they made a goal in 2016 that involved that growth. And between 2016 and 2020, there was a significant amount of growth. And then being able to sustain that and keep things going in a positive direction is just amazing. So yeah, it's a great story.
Right, right. Yeah, you guys are obviously doing something amazing over there, with the success that you've had. So I'm excited to get into it and talk a little bit more about it because I wanted to
Sure.
ask you, what role does strong messaging and brand communication play in that kind of, sustained growth, for your clients, but also internally at Thrive?
Yeah. So that's a big topic, Dylan. We could probably take a couple of days to break that down, but I'll
Yeah.
try to give a
Right.
little bit of reaction to that question, and
Yeah.
then we can break it apart. So messaging, and I'll do the external messaging at first.
Mm,
Really, what that involves is being able to communicate what you do, who you do it for, and what results you're able to achieve. And so when somebody's looking for help in their marketing, there's a lot of choices out there. We mentioned COVID before. There were a lot of agencies that sprung up during COVID because people were frantic uh, that they weren't as visible as they needed to be online.
mm,
So, one of the things that we stick to at Thrive is this balance between relationship and results, and to not be the agency that sort of, and again, going back to magic, has a lot of smoke and mirrors. We want
right.
you to be invested and involved in the planning and what we do, and for you to feel good about the investment that you're making. And so, if you think about relationships and results, it's sort of this road that you drive down, and there's a ditch on either side. One ditch is relationships, and one ditch is results. And if you veer off the road and land in that relationship ditch, you're going to have a fun time. The people are going to love you, but sooner or later, that's going to run out because they're investing money, and that relationship is not going to sustain the lack of results.
Mm,
If you veer off the road on the other side into the results ditch, that's great. People are excited. But if you're really a pain to work with, that's not going to last either.
yeah.
And so it's really, you're never going down the center of that road. You're always kind of veering back and
Back and forth.
forth
Yeah.
between relationships and results. But being able to communicate that in a clear way, and the messaging related to what is your value proposition.
Hmm.
And so one of the things that I do if I'm speaking from a stage is I tell everybody to take out their phone. And people have probably traveled from all over the country. And I'll say, take out your phone and just type in a search, SEO agency or digital marketing agency, and then fill in whatever city you traveled from. So it could be Phoenix, it could be Reno, it could be Los Angeles, it could be Boston. And if we're not in the top five, come up and see me after the talk.
Mm,
And so the reason why I feel comfortable and confident that I can say that is because we've spent 20 years making sure that we are significant and visible to Google in those markets. And
mm,
so when that's just a very basic messaging framework. I'm putting out some credibility. I'm asking you to do something, and I'm asking you to prove to yourself that we are worthy of a conversation about your marketing results because we're doing it for ourselves. And so typically people will come up, and not that, I have been stumped a couple of times if it's some
mhm.
really remote, out of the way place. And I'm like, okay, fair enough.
Right.
But what's the nearest city to you? And so they'll type that in. But most people are very interested, and I have people come up to me a year later when I show up to the same conference, and they go, I'll always remember that. And so
Mm,
I think messaging has to be simple. It has to be meaningful to that person who is actually typing that query in their phone. Um, and then you have to let your internal team know what the company's about. And the messaging has to be clear to make sure that they understand what are the priorities of you being a member of this team. And so we have five core values, and they spell the word growth. And the first one starts with gratitude.
mhm.
And you should be grateful that you got up today and you have a job to go to, and you have wonderful clients that need your smart brain, and you also exist in this world. And so you should be thinking about how you can give back to that world. And you have family and friends. And so there's all sorts of things related to growth. And I mean, if we want, we can go through all of them, but
Hmm.
um, that's just not something we stick on the website and stick on a wall and everybody forgets about it. We talk about it
Yeah.
every time we meet. We play out gratitude every Thursday, and so we have Thank a Thriver Thursday, where we thank a handful of people on the team that we want to thank for whatever
Right.
reason. And that spreads throughout the company. We've got about 175 people. And can you imagine 175 people thanking multiple people across the company on a Thursday? Like, why wouldn't you want to show up for work on a Thursday? You're
Yeah.
probably going to get thanked for something, right?
Right.
Yeah, so I think that's a pretty good summary, and happy to jump into any point, or we can go further if you want.
Yeah, no, I think that's extremely important topic because I've worked at places and probably many people listening have worked at places where they have those core values, they're written on the wall and things, but they don't ever talk about them, and it's not something, it's something that maybe the management team, executive team talks about, but
Yeah.
on the lower level, I feel like it just gets lost, right? So can you talk a little bit more of the importance of that, like speaking about those core values from the top all the way down to the bottom?
Yeah. And so as an executive team, we actually track a key metric of how many thank yous we sent out. And not that they're placating, not that it's a metric that I don't feel excited or I'm dialing it in. I actually think about who am I going to thank? And it's a
Right.
challenge to me to get out of my busy work that I'm trying to get accomplished and look at somebody else. And so that is important to us. I talked about giving back. We have a matching program that if you're interested in some nonprofit and you give an amount of money, we'll match it up to a certain dollar amount. We also want you volunteering in your community. And we track giving by dollars and giving by hours as a corporate metric at the top. And we have goals that we want, and we report on that monthly.
Hmm.
The other thing, when you have core values like that, it's a great way to have a conversation related to an employee review. How well are you living out the core values? If somebody violates one of those core values, what do we do?
Hmm.
Um, I'm not the bad guy. We all agreed that we were going to follow these core values. So you're
Yeah.
not following one. And so you need to improve in these areas, or we're going to have another conversation. So, I'll spell out the rest of growth. So we started with gratitude, work ethic is the W, ownership is the O. So own your mistakes. We're not perfect. Things are going to happen. But if you don't own your mistakes, then, and you try to push it off on somebody else, that's just not the culture that we want to embody.
Right.
The next one is think bigger. For the T, we want you bringing big ideas to the table, not only for the company, but for the clients. Like, digital marketing is a fast paced business. And, with all the stuff about AI, and I know we're probably going to get into that a little bit
Hmm.
later, stuff changes not just monthly, but daily, right?
Yeah.
And so you've got to be thinking bigger, and how are we going to navigate all this? And then the last one is honesty.
Mm.
And that, relates to, your personal relationship with honesty and how you treat your fellow coworkers, what you do and how you go about your work, and then how are you stewarding the funds that clients are providing us. And there's all sorts of things we could probably dig into, 5 or 6 different areas of honesty. And so,
Hmm.
I'm just able to rattle those off, and we expect every thriver to be able to do that as well, because we believe that's the right way to do business, and that's the right way to treat each other. Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like if everyone in the company can echo that same message, then you guys are really going to be working towards that same common goal, right? So you're absolutely right, Jimmy. I feel like we could go a million different ways with this, and we could sit here for hours, but I'm sure the listeners have some some other things to do throughout the day. So I did actually want to talk about, the magic script that we discussed.
yeah.
So what you describe as a brain-based framework for messaging, what inspired you to create that, and how is it different from traditional brand messaging approaches?
Yeah, I guess it got down to I love teaching people things. My parents were teachers. My mom was an English professor. My dad was in secondary education as a teacher and a principal, and
Mm.
then he was in the central office. And so I guess I got it, you know, straight from my parents. But somebody was asking me when I was trying to teach some concept, and I kept using theatrical terms.
Mm.
And they're like, why you keep talking about, your website is like the stage and things behind the scenes or backstage. And I went, oh, I guess because I'm a magician. Of course,
Right.
then the topic comes up, do a magic trick. Um, and so I talked earlier about how that's sort of the lens that I see marketing through. And I just started to reverse engineer what it means to have a message that connects with someone, creates that level of curiosity for them to keep watching. There's a theatrical term, sitting on the edge of your seat when you're
Yeah.
watching a performance, right? Or a movie, or like, why is that? Because you're
Yeah.
engaged. You're like, what's going to happen next? You're not looking at your watch. You're not talking to the person beside you. And then at some point, there has to be the finale or the big, the trick works. The lady floats in the air and vanishes. And then the same thing in a marketing situation where you're asking for something to happen, whether it's a click to call, a form fill, schedule an appointment, whatever the case may be. And so as I started to research it, I realized that there's actually brain chemistry involved with each one of those phases. And
Mm.
so I'll sort of walk through each one of those, and we can use a magic trick as sort of a guide to help us. And then I'll, relate it to a marketing conversation.
Yeah.
So I think everybody's probably familiar with a card trick, right?
Mhm.
And so if I walk out on stage and I say, I have a deck of cards here, and it's a blue backed deck of cards. Immediately, what happens in the audience is people start to go, oh, yeah, I've got a deck of cards at home too, right?
Mhm.
And then I might say, Dylan, do you like to play cards? And you might go, oh, yeah, I've poker night every Friday night with my buddies. And
Yeah.
I go, oh, that's awesome. Do you ever win? Oh, absolutely. Every time. Oh, my goodness. Well, we're not going to use you for a volunteer, Dylan. So, what am I doing? I'm creating some sort of connection, right?
Right.
And so, you may call out somebody's name, you might point out somebody in the front row, but there's some level of familiarity or like, oh, well, Jimmy's a nice guy.
Mhm.
Well, I'm genuinely interested, right? I'm not pretending. And so you need to be genuinely interested in your prospects or your customers. But what's happening there is a release of oxytocin in the brain. And that's just a neurotransmitter that floods your brain with this feeling of like, oh, this is going well. I kind of am interested in carrying on this conversation, right? And so you've basically opened up permission to then move into that curiosity phase.
Mm.
And so then if I say, Dylan, I want you to think about one of the cards. Obviously you're a poker player, so you know that there's four suits, clubs, hearts, spades, diamonds, and we'll do aces low all the way up to king. I just want you to think about any one of those cards.
Mhm.
And so you're in your head going, okay, I wonder what Jimmy's going to do. The rest of the audience is going, well, that's kind of weird. Usually they ask you to pick a card. He's just asking Dylan to think of a card.
Right.
And so you've opened up this space for people to try to connect the dots. Well, that's actually a release of dopamine. And we've heard about dopamine through social media addiction. It's not actually addiction to social media, it's actually the expectation of a reward, right?
Mm.
And so when I'm saying think of a card, the first thing that goes into your head is he going to be able to guess this card,
Right.
right? When you post something on social media, you're expecting a reward. You're expecting somebody to like it, to share it, to comment on it. And we can stretch that out for a while, but if we stretch it out too long, it's going to wear you out. You're going to get bored. You're going to get distracted. And
Right.
so, again, it's like a magic trick. You have to choreograph the proper amount of time. We've probably all seen movies or read books where they're just sort of dragging this out too long. And you're
Yes.
like, okay, I have no idea where we're going with this, but I've sort of lost interest.
Yeah.
And so, long before that happens, now you need to move to the climax of the trick. And so, I need to be able to figure out how am I going to reveal this card that you've just been thinking of, right? Am I going
Mhm.
to pull it out of my pocket? Am I going to point to the back of the theater and this, giant card is going to drop down and unfurl like a big flag or,
Mhm.
whatever the case may be. In a marketing conversation, then you need to figure out what is the proper next step to allow that person to respond in the way that you want. And so sometimes it can just be, give me your email address. Sometimes it can be click to call. Sometimes it can be purchase this product. Sometimes it can be schedule an appointment. If it's too much, maybe we violated that connection that was made. The curiosity didn't get us to the point where we were ready to commit at a higher level. And so it's really just, you could layer on a magic trick sequence to a marketing sequence, and that final phase is a release of serotonin. And that release of serotonin is sort of that everything's good with the world. I get it now. Like the curiosity is satisfied. And now it just feels very natural. We've moved through 3 phases of physiology. And without each of those, it doesn't really feel like a complete story or a complete sequence of events.
Yeah.
We can see it all the time, especially with connection requests on LinkedIn or, some pitching on social media where we think we're being genuine with a connection, but, people are like, oh my gosh, this is so cheesy.
Right.
And then they immediately move to the close and try to sell you something, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you violated those steps in the process. You haven't given each one of them time that they need to work effectively. And so that's really what it is about the magic script. And that can work for an email, it can work for a keynote speech, it can work for a blog post, it can work for an ad online, it can work for a sales conversation because it's a universal structure that can be short or it can be long.
Okay. Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right because it really seems like that's where the noise versus clarity comes into play, right? In marketing,
Yeah.
because it seems like there's companies who, like you said, drag it on or they're not focusing on their customers, like you said, and really
Yeah.
truly caring about them. It's easy to just put something out there and be like, oh, this is going to work for everybody. Like you said, it's not a cookie cutter kind
Yeah.
of thing. It's got to tailor towards the, their customers and clients. So that also comes into play with geographical regions and cultural differences, right? Because you actually mentioned it a little bit ago, talked about culture and geographical regions. So how do you tailor messaging strategies to work across cultural lines or geographical regions, especially because Thrive operates in different countless industries, right, across different countries?
Yeah, I would say most of our work comes from US based companies. We do have some international clients.
Yeah.
And so we are all the time trying to find, if it's not people within Thrive that have um, really a presence in that location,
Mm,
to understand what are the cultural norms, what's okay and what's not okay. Language that works in Texas is not going to work in um, Singapore, right?
right, right.
And so not only is it translation, there are many different dialects within countries. There is more business talk, there's more casual talk. So you really have to know how are you going to fit in and have people understand that you know who they are, because if you do it wrong, you're going to lose that ability to connect right out of the gate. The other thing happens when companies have individuals that don't live, and we'll just use US as an example. And so maybe they have team members that are outside the US and are not familiar with the geography, the nuance of our differences in states and um, language related to how we talk versus how people outside of the country talk.
Hmm.
You got to be careful if they're the ones writing copy, if they're the ones in an account management standpoint who are speaking to customers. And so I would say it works both ways.
Got it.
And it's really just being respectful and having empathy for the folks in the area that you are trying to reach and have a business conversation with. And then also respect for the customers that you have stateside that are interacting with somebody who may not have the knowledge that they need. Certainly they can learn it. But yeah, I would say it's a challenging thing and you have to treat it in the right way to make sure the conversation goes in the way that you want it to.
Hmm. Yeah. How long typically do you work with clients on that specifically? Does it take some time to really get that understanding before you guys start going into what you're building for the clients or building with the clients?
Related to things outside the US.
Yeah, or even in terms, like you said, it's even from Texas to New York to Montana to California, everyone's a little bit different. So how much time do you guys have to spend on that, understanding like the clients or the customers that your clients are trying to reach?
Yeah, I would say a lot of that is personality based on what do we know about the market, how formal or relaxed is the language. So we do a brand document that outlines how are we going to talk
Hmm.
to our customer. And then certainly within the company that we're working with, they have stakeholders that will say, now, when we speak to our customers in this area, here are the things that you want to make sure you understand versus this other area. And then again, because we have 175 team members on staff, then we're looking for a good fit, not only culturally, um, geographically, personality wise, when we start to put together that team. So
Hmm.
I would say, we can't take an inordinate amount of time because clients want to get on with doing the work of doing the work, right?
Hmm.
But we are sensitive to those nuances, and um, it's a continually learning process. And as you monitor social media, as you get responses back on various campaigns that we're running, then we start to filter that in. We actually have glossaries and phrasing handbooks that we have online that team members can reference as to how things are said from a product or service standpoint, what phrasing is okay, what phrasing is not okay, that type of thing.
Right, right. Is AI assisting in that at all? Are you guys utilizing AI to help you with those processes?
I would say AI is a tool that can be used. I think it's difficult for AI to understand some of those nuances.
Right.
AI is typically friendly. It's doesn't know all the war stories and the challenges and the founder story of how the business was created and the struggles that it went through. It wants to be nice. It wants to be, um, and yes, you can train it, but
Right.
I think the value of AI to assist you is when you have that tone figured out, then you
Mhm.
can help train AI to mimic what you want. But I would not rely on AI to come up with it on its own,
Mm.
because the other thing that we see with these AI tools is they'll hallucinate and they'll be untruthful and they'll say, yes, this is right. And you go, oh, I don't think it's right. Are you sure? Oh, you're right. I made a mistake. Let me rephrase that.
Right.
So yeah, you got to be careful and be willing to call out AI when it's wrong.
No, you're absolutely right. Yeah, I feel like the human connection is important, right? And so you have to
Yeah.
ensure that it is speaking the message that you would like it to. And if it's not, you got, like you said, you can train it. It usually initially is friendly, but then you can train it to how you want it to. But at the same time, it still doesn't come off as someone who knows everything that's been there their whole lives or, is truly understands the market, right?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. Well, Jamie, this has been amazing. I really do appreciate everything you've touched on and shared with us today. I did want to ask for listeners who want to connect with you or learn more about what you're doing at Thrive Agency, what's the best way for them to get in touch or follow your work?
Yeah. So I'm on LinkedIn. I post every day. It's usually some sort of encouragement or applicable lesson in marketing. So connect with me there and comment, ask me questions on my posts, DM me if you want to chat about some other things. And then Thrive Agency is the website. Lots of good resources there. I do a blog every month that's usually accompanied by about a 20-minute video that breaks down some marketing concept. And yeah, there's certainly ways for folks to get in touch with Thrive if they're interested in needing any help with marketing, or if somebody wants to reach out to me and I can have that initial conversation and maybe point you in a direction, I'm happy to do that as well.
Amazing, amazing. Do any of them follow up with a magic trick as well?
I have done some magic tricks, or I mentioned magic. I should do one on a post.
Yeah.
That might be a good topic.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I agree.
I did
What
write an
was
article about magic and how it relates to messaging in Forbes, so somebody could look that one up.
Oh, good. Yes, definitely. Yeah, I'll make sure that those are all in the show notes as well, make it a little easier on the listeners so they can start seeing a lot of your work as well. And
Okay.
so I always like to end the podcast, with the episodes with some advice for the entrepreneurs out there, the leaders out there. So, as someone who's both led strategy and stood on stage as a TEDx speaker, what's your advice to leaders looking to become better communicators, not just in marketing, but in leadership overall?
Yeah, so I'll be quick with this story. I was fortunate enough to be involved in some training with some magicians with a Broadway director in Montreal. It was about 8 or 10 of us that went to Montreal for a week and stayed in this wonderful chalet that the director owned. He's actually a magician, but he was in the original cast of Annie and directed 22 Broadway productions. And
Wow.
so it was like the first day, and we're all like really excited. And wow, we're going to hang out with this guy for a week. And there was this stump out in the middle of the yard, and he told us one by one to go stand on the stump. And he said, I just want you to give me your name, your address, where you come from, and tell us your phone number. And so I'm looking around and we're like, what in the world does he want us to do that for? And, these are other magicians and they're used to a lot of stage time. And so you jump up on the stump and you sort of talk to the group that's out there. And we were all baffled. We all
Yeah.
sat down and we're wondering, does he want us to make sure we speak loud enough? Does he want to know if we put our hands in our pockets? Like, what is he trying to get to?
Hmm.
So then he jumps up on the stump. And, if you can imagine 8 or 10 people sitting side by side in like a horizontal row, he starts over on the right hand side as he's looking at it. And he goes, Hi, my name is Bob. I live in New York City. He pauses and he looks at the next person. My phone number is area code 212. Ba, 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 da, da, da. Pauses, looks at the next person. And so all of a sudden, we all got it.
Mm.
We were all standing up there talking to 10 people. We weren't talking to 10 individual people.
Yeah.
And so I always go back to that lesson. And whether it's a crowd of 300, whether it's a team meeting, whether I'm on Zoom, whether we're sitting around a table, is you're having individual conversations. People have thoughts in their head, they have a stake in the game, and you need to treat each one of those folks as an individual person with individual contributions that they can bring to the table.
Mm.
And I would say that is a leadership lesson, and you're not leading a group, you're leading a bunch of individuals, and you need to know how that individual is going to absorb that information, who can give you a response right away, who's got to go back to their office and think about it, who's going to want to write you, who's going to want to communicate verbally. And the more you know about that, the more you're going to be able to bring those folks along. So,
Oh, that was amazing, amazing advice. Yeah, you want people to follow you, then, make them feel important, right? So
yeah,
that is a great, great lesson. Thank you so much for sharing. And again, Jimmy, thank you so much for joining today, spending time with me and the listeners.
great. Thank you, Dylan. It was fun.